Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk about order of operations. We're going to talk about order of operations with the 5 operations that we know about. What are those? Operations are just addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and then the exponent, right? B to the n power, right? The exponent is an operation. And so adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and powers, plus the grouping symbols. And the grouping symbols take a lot of different forms. So we've got the parentheses, we've got the brackets, and then we've got the fraction bar, which is kind of a, well, it means division, but it also means grouping. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and the numbers we're going to use are just the numbers that we're really familiar with, which are the integers. So positive and negative numbers. We're not going to get into any sort of difficult fractions or anything else. Okay, now why do we need an order of operations? Think about this. Just think about this problem for just a minute. 3 times, let's say 3 plus 2 times 5. Okay, 3 plus 2 times 5. If I said do that problem, what do you get? And it might be fun to just do it. Go ahead and do it. 3 plus 2 times 5. And what did you get? Okay, let me do it and see what I get. One way that I could do this is I could say 3 plus 2 is 5. And then 5 times 5 is 25. Notice that I did one piece at a time. I drew a line under the piece I was doing just to kind of help me see visually which part I was doing, and I wrote the answer, and then the rest of it I wrote down, and then I just did it again. Okay, that would be one option. The answer is 25. The second option would be to do 2 times 5, which is 10, plus 3, and then 3 plus 10 is 13. Now, you can imagine that it would be a problem in math if we gave people a math problem. Like, this is a really simple math problem here. Oh my goodness, I just did something, I don't know what it is. Okay, there it is. This is a really simple math problem, and if we gave people a math problem like this, even a simple one, and different people came up with different answers, right? There was no agreement about what the answer to this problem is. That would be really difficult. Like, you couldn't use math for anything useful if you kept getting different answers every time you worked the problem, just depending on what you felt like doing. So order of operations is a way to agree that this is what we mean when we ask you to do a math problem. We mean to do it in this order. Okay, order of operations is just an agreement we make about the order we're going to do these various operations in. Okay, so in other words, I suppose we could invent another math that had a different order of operation. That'd be fun to do, but we're not going to do that today. It's going to be hard enough to remember these rules. But one of the reasons it's going to be hard is because it's somewhat arbitrary. Somewhat arbitrary. They do make sense, but it's somewhat arbitrary. Okay. Let me just run through the quick order of operations. The first thing is you always do what's inside the grouping symbols before you do what's outside. And sometimes we'll have more than one type of grouping symbol. So for example, just by convention, we'll have what's called a bracket will be the outermost. If there's more than one grouping symbol, the bracket will be the outermost, and then the parentheses will be the innermost. But we can keep on going with brackets and parentheses, kind of alternating. And notice that the different shapes help us to think about the brackets are encompassing all of that, and the parentheses is encompassing from there to there. Okay, and we go from the inside to the outside. Okay, and when we do our order of operations mnemonic, we call this the P level. This is P for parentheses, but it's any kind of grouping symbol. We do what's inside, and then we do what's outside. Okay, the second step of our mnemonic is E, the E level. That's the exponents. That's our powers. So anything, a number raised to power is our exponents level. And so we're going to do all the exponents first, and then we'll do everything else. And of course, we do the exponents inside the parentheses first, and we do the other stuff inside the parentheses first, and then we'll do the exponents outside the parentheses. Okay. The third step is the multiplication and division step. And oftentimes, you'll see this on the our mnemonic here, which we'll do in just a second. We'll give that two letters, M and D, standing for multiplication and division. But really, when we say M and D, multiplication and division, we mean multiply and divide left to right. Left to right. So we go left to right, and we do all the multiplication and all the division as we come to it, left to right. So we don't do all the multiplication first and then all the division second. We do them both at the same time, left to right. Okay, and the same thing with addition and subtraction. So the next two letters are A and D, A and S. Sorry, don't know the letters of the alphabet. A and S, but we say A for addition first and S for subtraction second. But what we mean is do all the addition and all the subtraction in order from left to right. So we don't make a difference between them. Okay, and so there's our famous mnemonic, PEMDAS. You may or may not have heard about this. This is what people say to help them remember the order in which we do things. So we do all the things inside parentheses first, and then we do all the things outside parentheses in the order of exponents first, then multiplication and division second, and then addition and subtraction last. Okay, left to right, everything left to right. Okay, let's apply this to some simple problems first, and then we'll get more and more complex as we move along. So first rule is we always move left to right. Right, so 4 plus 3 times negative 6. There's two operations there. There's a plus, right, and then there's that 3 next to the parenthesis means times. Okay, then according to PEMDAS, we do the multiplication before we do the addition. So when we have to make a choice, should I do the 4 plus 3 first, or should I do the 3 times negative 6 first? We choose to do the multiplication first. That's what we mean by this. Okay, notice there was parentheses, but this particular set of parentheses was only keeping that negative sign on the 6 so that we didn't think it meant 3 minus 6, right? So you can imagine if I wrote 4 plus 3 minus 6, or negative 6, or even if I wrote times negative 6, that'd be really confusing. It would look very much like a minus 6. So I put the parenthesis so that everybody understands that this is a multiplication problem. 3 next to the parenthesis means 3 times, and then the thing that's being multiplied is the negative 6. Okay, so we're going to do 3 times negative 6 is negative 18, and then and this is really important for order of operations. This is the most important habit that you can develop here in this stage, is the habit of rewriting the problem after you do one operation. So you're going to do one operation and rewrite the rest. So I underlined 3 times negative 6, and I did that, negative 18. And then I write down the rest of it. And so it's 4 and the plus. And I can put parentheses around the negative 18 if I want to, just to keep the plus sign and the negative sign away from each other. But it's 4 plus negative 18. Okay, now I look, and what's the next operation in line? Well, there's only one left, 4 plus negative 18. And I'll follow the rules for adding integers. If the signs are different, we subtract. So they are. So we're going to write 14. And if we keep the sign of the stronger one, the bigger one, the one that's further away from 0, it's negative. And then that is my final answer. So notice it took me 2 lines to do this. 1, 2, because there was 2 operations, addition and multiplication. And that's going to be very typical. So we do the operations as we find them in the order of operations, not from left to right, but in the order that you're supposed to do them. Okay, so now let's look at this. Question number 2, we have 2 operations again. We have a minus sign right there, subtract, and a division sign right there. Which one goes first, order of operations? Well, normally we would do the division first, and then we would do the subtraction second, because division in the order of operations comes before subtraction, except we have a parenthesis, and the parenthesis changes the order of operations. It says do what's inside first, the parentheses, and then do what's outside. And so inside that particular parenthesis is 20 minus 15. You could say that's the same as, if you wanted to, you could say that's the same as 20 plus negative 15. And then we'll just follow the rules, right? 20 plus negative 15 is, signs are different. We subtract. 20 minus 15 is 5. And the stronger number in this case is the positive one, so that's positive 5 divided by negative 1. Now, I kept the parentheses there just in case I needed them. It turns out I didn't need them here, but just in case. If there was something about that 5 that could get confusing if it was left hanging there without a parenthesis, I want to put a parenthesis there till I know I don't need it. And for example, this negative 1, there's a parenthesis around that. Is that telling me I need to do the negative 1 next or first? No, it's telling me that that 1 is negative, and we didn't want to get the negative sign confused with the division sign. So divided by negative 1. And so there we have it, 5 divided by negative 1. The second operation is division. 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 5. I'm going to write it off to the side here. Negative 5, and that's the answer. Okay. You know that mentally I could have thought of that as 5 divided by negative 1 is 5 over negative 1. Like, we can think of it like as a fraction if we want to. And there we have it. Okay, now, there was my order of operations. Normally I would do the division first, and then I would do the subtraction. But because of the parentheses, it changed the order of operations so that I do what's inside the parenthesis, which is the negative or the minus sign, and then I did the division. Okay. Question number 3. Left to right. 5 squared minus 10. What are the operations here? I think you can see really clearly that one of the operations, the only one that we can really clearly see, is the minus sign there. We're subtracting. But there's a second operation. What is it? It's the squared. 5 squared. So that's an exponent. And so we do the exponent first, and then we'll do the subtraction second. There's no parentheses here to change which of those operations I'm doing, change the order of my operation. So I'm going to do the exponents first, and then I'll do the subtraction. So 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is 25. And then bring down the minus 100. It's helpful for me when I see this to rewrite it as 25 plus negative, the opposite of 100, right? Minus 100 means 25, minus 100 means plus negative 100. So that helps me to kind of visualize what's going on here. And 25 plus negative 100, those are opposite numbers. They're opposite signs. So we're going to subtract 75. 100 minus 25 is 75. And then we're going to keep the sign of the stronger number, which was the negative 1. Negative 100 is bigger than positive 25, or further away from 0. And there we have our final answer. And we're done. So again, we did the order of operations, exponents first, then subtraction last. Let's move the slide up here, and we're going to have to kind of remember our order of operations now. But if we want to, we can write PEMDAS at the top of our page to help us remember it. But I always like to put a slash between the M and the D. Multiplication and division go together. A and the S, addition and subtraction, go together. They're not, that's not like, you don't do the multiplication first and then the division. You do the left to right together. Okay, so here we go. Okay, this is only technically an order of operations problem. I want you to see this one. Let's just take a minute to focus on these two questions, questions 5 and 4. And here's what you should do. Just take a wild guess. What do you think the answer is to number 4 and then for number 5? I'll give you a hint. 5 squared, we just did 5 squared. It's 5 squared means 5 times 5, which is 25. Okay, so what do you think the answer is for number 4? What do you think the answer is for number 5? It has something to do with 25. Okay, now here's the answer. The answer for number 4 is negative 25. And the answer for number 5 is positive 25. Now, the question is why? Why are these different? What was different about them? And how does that go with PEMDAS, with the order of operations? What does that have to do with anything? So let's think about number 4. We had two things going on here. We have this negative sign. It says add the opposite, or this number is negative. And we had the exponent. And the order of operations says, first do the exponent, and then do the subtract. All right, well, there was no subtraction. It was just negative. Well, subtract and negative kind of are the same thing. So order of operations says do the squaring first, and the squaring is on the 5. So it's just the 5 that's being squared. 5 squared is 25. And then put that negative sign on the result. That's what that means. Versus question number 5, where we put the parenthesis. Notice the only difference is we put a parenthesis around the 5 and the negative sign. So that negative 5 is inside the parenthesis with the 5. The negative is inside the parenthesis with the 5. And when we say square, we mean square the whole thing. So square root of negative 5 squared, I can't talk, is negative 5 times negative 5. Whereas negative 5 squared is just negative 5 times 5. Okay, so one is two negatives multiplied together, one is two numbers multiplied together, and then a negative tacked on afterwards. Okay, it's really important to see the difference there. And we'll apply it to number 6. What are the exponents? Or, I'm sorry, what are the operations? The operations are the exponents. There's two of them. Okay, there's an exponent there, there's an exponent there. And then there's a subtraction sign, there's a minus sign. And then there's actually a negative sign, which is kind of like a subtraction sign. But notice there's no parentheses, so both exponents are going to apply just to the numbers. So 4 squared is 16. 4 squared is 16. And 5 squared is 25. And then the minus signs were not a part of that. The minus sign and the negative sign were not a part of that, so they both just come down. Now, I don't want to let this pass by. I just broke the rules. Right? Remember I said do one step at a time. But I just did 2 steps at once. I did both exponents at the same time. 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25. And I didn't take 2 lines to get those done. That's because the 4 squared, this bit, and the 5 squared, that bit, were being separated from each other by this minus sign. And so they weren't going to interfere with each other because that minus sign is one of the last things I'm going to do. So I can do those operations at the same time because I know they're not impacting one another. Okay. Well, side note, we'll get used to this after a while. Negative 16 minus 25 is the same as negative 16 plus the opposite of 25, which is negative 25. Now we think about this. The signs are the same, so we add. That's, what is that, 41. And then they keep the sign of the stronger number. They're both negative, so the answer is negative. All right. Order of operations. Order of operations is really important. It's important for the smallest math problem with more than one operation going on. As soon as you put 2 operations in a sentence, 2 different adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing things in a sentence, especially subtraction and division. Those two especially can't be done out of order. And so whenever you have more than one operation, you have to think about which one should I do first. But of course, since we are practicing hard stuff here, we're going to give you some problems where you have a whole bunch of operations. How many operations are going on here? Well, we have this minus sign here, the negative sign, and that's important to keep in mind. That maybe that's just a negative, but let's just think about the possibility it might be an operation. There's a multiplication there, 3 parentheses, that's 3 times whatever's inside the parenthesis. We have this minus sign inside the parenthesis. We have that parenthesis, which is not an operation, but it does tell us what has to be done first. We have the squared, which is an operation, it's an exponent. We have this plus sign, that's addition. We have another number next to a parenthesis, that means multiplication. Number outside the parenthesis means multiplication. There's a subtraction going on here. And then again, another grouping symbol and another exponent. Okay, so we have multiplication, subtraction, exponent, addition, multiplication, subtraction, exponent. And we have grouping symbols around this subtraction and that subtraction. So which one, does that spell anything? I hope not. So what do we do first? Well, we're going to do the subtractions inside the parentheses first, right? There's two separate parentheses, they're not impacting each other, so we can do them both first. Then order of operations says we do whatever's inside the parenthesis first, then whatever's outside. The exponents are going to happen second, and again, those are separated from each other by this addition here, so that's safe to do them at the same time. Then we're going to have some multiplications going on, and again, those multiplications are separated from each other by the addition, so we'll do those third, and then we're going to do the addition fourth, or last. And that's 7 operations that we're going to do, but it'll take us 4 lines. Okay, so here we go. We just made a little plan here. You don't always have to make a plan, but it is good to look at each line and analyze what operation am I supposed to do first, and the first one we're supposed to do is the parentheses. So we're going to do 4 minus 8, which is negative 4. I'm going to keep the parenthesis, and I'm going to rewrite the rest of this part of that neighborhood of the problem, and then I'm going to do the same for the second parenthesis, 14 minus 16, that's negative 2. And then I'm going to write in the rest of the problem that I didn't do. So I did 4 minus 8, I did 14 minus 16, but I didn't do anything else, and so everything else just got copied down straight down into my next line. And again, this is a really important skill to practice, the skill of rewriting the whole problem so that it's neat. You can clearly see what the problem is, the new problem is, and you can clearly see what operation needs to be done next. Okay, remember our plan? Our plan was to do the exponents next, so we have negative 4 squared. Negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. Still going to keep it in parentheses because I want to make sure that I remember that that 3 is being multiplied by whatever that negative 4 squared is. So I put it back in parentheses just so I wouldn't forget that there's a multiplication going on there. And negative 2 cubed, well, that means negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. And negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, times another negative 2 is negative 8. So again, I'm going to keep that in parentheses just so I don't think that I'm supposed to do 5 minus 8. Remember, it's 5 times whatever this negative 2 cubed becomes. And so now I'm just reminding myself it's still a multiplication problem. Okay, don't discount don't discount how easy it is to fool yourself by leaving off a symbol. You leave off one little symbol, you change what the problem is asking, and then you do it wrong because you changed the question. So you always have to copy these very, very carefully. So remember, our plan was to do the exponents second and the multiplications third. We've got two multiplications here, negative 3 times 16. Let's see, 18, carry the 1, that's 48, and it's negative. A negative times a positive is negative, plus, and then 5 times negative 8, we'll do that multiplication. Well, 5 times negative 8, that's negative also, it's negative 40. I'll put parentheses in there just so I don't get the plus sign and the negative sign mixed up. But I'm adding now two negative numbers, negative 48 plus negative 40. And remember the rule for adding, if the signs are the same, is you add them together. That's 88. Keep the sign of the stronger number, both negatives, so the stronger one is going to be negative. And we're done. So notice that we don't have to do one line per, or one operation per line. We can sometimes we can get away with doing two if the two operations that we're doing are separated by a lower operation. So remember, addition is one of the last things we do. So there was an addition problem right there in the middle, allowed me to do an operation on the left of the addition sign and an operation on the right of the addition sign each time, without fear of them interfering, because I knew that we weren't going to have any interaction between those two sides until that last step when we did the addition problem, because it was the last operation. Okay, that's a lot going on there. Let's move on to another example. And again, please feel free to watch these over again, because it takes a while to get used to this whole idea of order of operations. This is confusing. Okay, got two more problems, I believe. I'm going to just come straight out and say that this next one is confusing all by itself just because of the nature of the setup. We have this problem is set up with a giant ordering symbol here right in the middle. It's called the fraction bar. We've got a fraction bar right there in the middle, and that makes this really difficult to deal with, because how do you write this problem out line by line when it's made up of two lines and you're going to simplify each one separately? There's a couple of ways to handle this, and one way is to just take one of the lines and rewrite it and simplify that part all by itself. -1 minus parenthesis -2 parenthesis open parenthesis -3. Okay, so we can just do that one here, and then I can take the bottom part and I can move that one over here and do that separately. 2 bracket -8 divided by parenthesis -2 minus 2 close parenthesis close bracket. All right, now notice, and then I'm going to do that one here, and then once I'm done, I'll put both of those answers back into the fraction. So I want to point out that what we just demonstrated, what we're demonstrating here, is the fact that a division, the fraction bar acts as a division symbol. So it means divide by, the top divided by the bottom. But it also acts as a parenthesis, and it says take the top and simplify it as much as you can, and take the bottom, simplify it as much as you can before you do the division of the top divided by the bottom. Okay, so that fraction bar always means not only divide, but it also means parenthesis around the top, parenthesis around the bottom. So it's keeping those the numerator and denominator separated from each other until we get them simplified. All right, so let's do the numerator. Let's do this purple bits right here. So we've got a multiplication, 10 times -1, subtraction, which is next to the parenthesis, which it means kind of a multiplication like that, negative times the inside negative, and then another multiplication. Okay, which one do we want to do first? Well, it's always a fairly safe bet. If you have a negative sign, next to a parenthesis, to just take that and distribute it to anything inside the parentheses. So that negative sign is going to be on the -2. So minus -2 is the same as +2. So I can do this as just plus parenthesis +2. Okay. That may not be strictly order of operations, but it's going to make this a lot easier to deal with. Now we can see that we have two multiplications, and an addition. So we're going to do the two multiplications. 10 times -1 is -10. And 2 times -3 is -6. Those are the answers to my multiplication, and then we have an addition. So -10 plus -6. Yeah, the signs are the same, so we add them together, 16, and they're both negative, so the answer is negative. If we add two negatives, we get a negative answer. Now, I just put a box around my answer. Of course, that's not the answer. That's just part of the answer. I need to put this back in my numerator, so we'll do that. We'll do that in just a minute. We need to get the denominator done as well. So -16 goes on top. What goes on the bottom? So looking at the denominator, this green bit over here, we have two grouping symbols, the bracket, and we have a parenthesis. So we're going to do what's inside the innermost grouping symbol, the parenthesis here. So we're going to do this bit right here. And we can think of -2 minus 2 as -2 plus -2. In other words, adding two things that are the same sign, right? It's okay if you see it this way without rewriting it. -2 minus 2, they're both negative. So that's going to be -4. 2 plus 2 is 4, and keep the sign of the bigger number. Okay, then we go into the bracket. Before I do that, I have to rewrite the whole problem. So I rewrote the whole problem, and now I'm going to do this bracket part. What's in there? What's the operation in there? And it's a little bit tricky because we've got all these negative signs, but it's -8 divided by -4, so it's a division problem. So first of all, we apply the rule that says if the signs are the same, the answer is positive. If the signs are different, the answer is negative, so the answer is going to be positive something. And 8 divided by 4 is 2. So the answer is +2, and we don't have to write the plus sign there, the positive sign, but I just did that just to remind myself the answer was positive, not negative. And then I write down the times 2 that was outside the bracket. And 2 times +2 is +4. And again, don't put a box around it. That's not the answer. That's just the denominator. Now I have the fraction, the original fraction has been simplified, so that now I can deal with that fraction as a division sign. So now this means divide. -16 divided by 4 is, well, the signs are different, so the answer is negative. 16 divided by 4 is 4. And there we have it. All right, that was about as nasty a problem as you will see. So if you have trouble with these, you know, it's worth doing them a couple of times. Get a fresh sheet of paper, make it nice. You know, don't even use line paper, just use blank paper, and write really big numbers. Be really careful that everything is really neat, and then write line by line, and try this until you're consistently getting it right. Okay, we're going to do one more, and this is another chance to practice writing neatly, because this one, we have to rewrite the problem because it starts out with a whole bunch of letters. X squared minus y minus z. And we need to rewrite this with all those letters replaced with what the letters stand for. Remember, those are called variables, and the variables stand for particular numbers, and we're told what the numbers are. So now we're just going to rewrite that problem with the numbers inputted in place of the letters. And here is a tip. It's always a good idea to put parentheses around the number when you're replacing a variable with the number that it stands for. So we're going to start with the x. The x is -2, so I'm going to write -2 in place of the x, and then where the what was happening to the x, a couple of things were happening. It was being squared, so we're going to put a squared above the parenthesis there. And then it was being subtracted, so we're going to put a minus sign here. And then I'm going to put parentheses for the next thing, which is the y. And the y is 4. So put parentheses with 4 inside. And then what was being done to the y? Well, we're subtracting something else. What are we subtracting? A z. So I'm going to put parentheses for the z. And then z is -1. Put the -1 inside the parentheses. And notice that you could argue that the parentheses around the 4 were not necessary, and you'd be right. But the parenthesis around the -2 was really necessary, because otherwise I would think that the exponent squared here was not applied to the negative, but it clearly is because it's applied to all of x. So the exponent is on the x. X includes the negative. X is -2. And the parentheses were pretty handy when it came to that z, which was -1, because it's minus z, so minus -1 means something a little bit different. If I didn't put the parentheses there, I'd be tempted to only put one negative sign or one sign instead of two, and that would mean something different. So this is why those parentheses help us out. All right, so let's do the exponents first. Order of operations, -2 squared is 4. -2 times -2 is 4. I'm going to bring down the minus sign. Going to bring down the 4. I'm going to drop the parenthesis because we don't need that one. We can see that there's nothing important going on with that, that parenthesis around the 4. But minus -1, I'm going to write as +1. Okay, so now I've gotten rid of all the parentheses. Order of operations, we've got a subtract problem and we've got an addition problem. Right? Subtraction and addition. Which one do we do first? Well, if you didn't catch this before, PEMDAS does not mean that you do the addition before you do the subtraction. It means do the addition and the subtraction in order from left to right. Just like MD does not mean do multiplication and then the division. You do multiplication and division at the same time, left to right. So we're going to go left to right and do the first thing we come to, whether it's addition or subtraction, whichever comes first. And it happens to be subtraction. So 4 minus 4 is 0, and then I bring down the +1. And then 0 plus 1 is 1. And that's my final answer. Notice if I had got that wrong, 4 minus 4 plus 1, and I said PEMDAS means do addition first and then subtraction, I would have 4 minus, well, if I wasn't careful, I would write 4 plus 1, which is 5, and then 4 minus 5 would be -1. So we got to be careful with that. The best way to avoid doing that is if you think of 4 minus 4 as 4 plus -4. And then it will be a little bit safer to go out of order. -4 plus 1 is -3, and -3 plus 4 is 1. Okay, that's a lot to chew on. Thank you very much for watching. You might want to do all of the odd problems this week. Check your answers every single time in the back of the book. It's so easy to get these wrong, but once you get the rhythm going, and once you get used to following these rules of PEMDAS, number 1, it's going to be easy, and number 2, it's something you're going to do for as long as you are doing math, which is going to be a long time. So you might as well get used to this. PEMDAS, order of operations, is going to be a huge part of every single bit of math you do for the rest of your life. So take some time and study this, practice it. It's going to be worth the effort, I promise you. Thanks for watching.